Hello, thank you for joining me today. So, I know in my last video I said I wanted to do this, and hopefully you'll understand why I waited until now to put this one out. I want to start small town histories. I'd like to talk about those towns that most people don't even know exist, but still had an impact in helping to create America and really had a worldly impact as well. And I want to start off with one of my favorite places to visit, and that is Darien, Georgia. I'm sure no one has really heard of it, but hopefully after today, you'll know a little bit more about it and you'll be interested in it too. What we need to look at first is the actual area that is known as the New World. The French would call it New France. Spanish would just call it La Florida. But at this time, the area that we know today to be Georgia is literally called the debatable land. There has always been this back and forth over who actually owned it. And the Spanish have been attempting settlements since the early 1500s all along this coast because they believe that this coast is crucial to protecting their treasure fleets. Originally, most of their wealth is coming from their South American and their island settlements to the south, and the treasure fleet is going to sail right up past what we know today to be the coast of Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and into North Carolina. They're thinking this is a good strategic point to have their own ports. They want to convert natives. Everybody needs to be Catholic. And there are many, many settlement attempts by the Spanish. As you can see from the map that is courtesy of the Wormslow Plantation. Very nice place to visit, by the way. They have been attempting different settlements along the coast and elsewhere for many years, but they're just not working out. They're failing for one reason or another. Seems to be the going thing when it comes to the Spanish. But eventually, when we get around to the time of James Oglethorpe, this is a man that you're going to want to remember simply because he is responsible for the colony of Georgia. You have Charlestown, which is known as Charleston today, in what is present day South Carolina. You have that, but further down, you have St. Augustine. St. Augustine being the established settlement by the Spanish. And mind you, the Spanish feel they own everything. You always have this constant threat of the Spanish invading to the north, or the Spanish have the threat of the English invading to the south. So James Oglethorpe has decided he wants to do this, and he is going to start with the city of Savannah. Savannah would come about in 1733. It seems to be fairly well, but there needs to be a buffer. And essentially, this was going to be the thought process for the colony of Georgia, to be a buffer between the English in the north and the Spanish in the south. So the English first attempt in this area, they would establish Fort King George. Again, meant to be a buffer between the threat of a Spanish attack from the south and to prevent some issues with some natives as well. Because let's face it, not all these natives are going to be okay with you being there. Just saying. However, when Fort King George is established in 1721, already from the get-go, it is given the people who are less desirable for war than others. Let's go with almost retired, older soldiers, ones who were wounded. Some of them spent a month in a hospital in Charlestown before they even came to Fort King George. And so you really don't have the best of the best there defending your town or your fort against the Spanish anyway. There's all kinds of issues. Of course, the heat is a huge ordeal. The bugs, the alligators, I mean, come on, this is a marshy place, and they are out there and they are cutting down these trees and they are trying and attempting to build this thing, but they are just so hot and horrible. And apparently, they had a very big drinking problem. Well, I can't say I wouldn't, being in a new land and, having to do something I really didn't want to do. Kind of get it. But the fort itself is not going to be able to actually be sustained. In about 1725, mysteriously, a fire is going to break out and it is going to destroy the big storehouse that you see in the middle there, which is actually where they had stored all of their gunpowder and their ammunitions. And if you were to visit the site today, this is all a replica. However, there was a woman named Bessie Lewis. She was actually from Ohio, but when she came into the area, she was very intrigued with the history of it. And it was actually because of her that they were able to find the exact spot of where Fort King George was. And so, thanks to her efforts, we have the replica on the exact site today. And eventually, when they would start doing their digs and their testing and everything, they would find many artifacts to lend precedent to this. And of course, she's studying old maps and she's putting in the work and the effort to find this. Eventually, it's found that about 140 people would die in this area. And so the Daughters of the American Revolution would actually put up gravestones, and that's what you see in the picture to your bottom right corner, is the stones that they would erect where they had done ground testing and found actual remains. So this place did have a presence before the establishment of Darien, but it wasn't long and it wasn't much. And eventually, the fort is going to be abandoned in 1727, and it's basically just left to ruin and let nature reclaim the land. So I can't talk about Darien without starting with Savannah, simply because, as I stated before, James Oglethorpe is going to be the one to believe in this Georgia colony. And so in 1733, he helps to establish Savannah. Now, Savannah is not established by the best of the best. It is more people from debtors' prisons, common people, not the elite nobility per se of England itself. And so Oglethorpe does have this idea that these people could actually come over, they could do some hard work, they could make a better life for themselves, and essentially it's going to create this environment that actually works out fairly well. He would actually invite the first group of Jewish settlers to America. He proclaimed no slavery in the colony of Georgia whatsoever, and during his lifetime, he was able to maintain this. Eventually, it's decided we need to create another settlement. And so, Oglethorpe's thinking, okay, we have these people, and yes, we're doing well, but there's always this threat. And the majority of the people in Savannah are not at all soldiers. You're just not going to have that. And when you start thinking about it at the time, who are going to be the best people to help defend the colony? Who are the people that are going to be able to come over here and endure the harsh climate, endure these hard environmental struggles, or put in the hard work to actually make this happen? Well, who else but the Scottish Highlanders? So if you're looking at the screen, you can kind of understand why I waited to put this video out. Because in January of 1736, 177 Scottish Highland men, women, and children would arrive in the new Georgia colony to establish a settlement along the Altamaha River that they would call New Inverness. Now you're probably wondering why I'm saying that. Well, at first, that's what they called it. The majority of them were from Inverness, Scotland. So when they got here, to them, this was just New Inverness. Eventually, the town is going to be renamed Darien after a failed Scottish settlement attempt. Most of the time we hear about the Spanish attempts, English and French attempts at settling in different places, but the Scottish would make an attempt to establish a colony in what is Panama today. Unfortunately, this would fail miserably, and the people behind it were just horrible. They were essentially trying to profit from something that they knew was going to fail, and it would eventually become known as the Darien scheme. And because of this, the town of New Inverness is eventually renamed Darien. With that being said, they have found where the so-called Fort King George was, and they noticed there was also some other things there. Well, it turns out the Fort King George was actually established on a failed Spanish mission settlement attempt some years before. So they see what they need to do and they automatically get to work. James Oglethorpe would come to visit them in February, which just a few weeks later, and he's telling of how they've already got their guardhouse built, their storehouse built, their chapels built. They have houses built for people to live in already. They are on it. They are right then and there proving that they are the right people to be that buffer between the Spanish in the south and the English settlements in the north. What I did find amusing, and I really wish I could have been a fly on the wall during this, the majority of these Scottish settlers spoke Scottish Gaelic. Few of them even spoke English. Can you imagine trying to have a conversation with a Scottish Gaelic speaking Highlander and a Native American trying to understand what is going on? I would have loved to have heard any of that kind of conversation. However, that being put aside, these Scots are going to be instrumental in a lot of different things throughout America's history. But they would absolutely prove to be a great buffer between the Spanish and the English. They would prove this at instances such as Oglethorpe's attempt to attack St. Augustine. Though it would fail, they would have a few casualties and they would have a few victories, but they would retreat back. The Spanish would attempt to attack Fort Frederica, which was established just 18 miles south around the same time as Darien, but it's these Scottish Highlanders that would be manning Fort Frederica. When a Spanish attempt to attack Fort Frederica, even though these Scottish Highlanders are outnumbered, they attack them head on, and they meet them in what is known as the Battle of the Bloody Marsh. And it's because of that battle, the Spanish would never attack the colony of Georgia again. Like many different settlements at the time, Darien does not escape the Revolutionary War. And one of its most famous residents would actually become a general under George Washington. Lachlan Mackintosh was just a child whenever his father brought them to the colony of Georgia to establish Darien. He'd spend his younger years in Darien, and then he would move on to Savannah, where he would become a member of the Georgia Battalion, eventually this becoming a part of the Continental Army. When he is promoted to Brigadier General in 1776, a man named Button Gwinnett is not happy with this because he wanted the job. So the two men have a duel, and unfortunately, Button Gwinnett is a signer of the Declaration of Independence, so it doesn't look good when Gwinnett dies and Lachlan is only wounded. And a lot of people wanted him charged with murder, but he would be moved north and be sent to Valley Forge and directly under the command of George Washington. And guess where George Washington would send him? He would send him to the headquarters of the Western Department at Fort Pitt, which is actually my neck of the woods. Isn't that something? Eventually, when the war is over, he would move back to Savannah. He would at one point host George Washington at his Savannah house before passing away in 1806. But His father was one of the founders of the colony of Darien, and he himself was instrumental in helping with the American Revolution. So the industries of Darien are actually going to end up being known worldwide, especially when it comes to the timber industry. You see sawmills pop up around the 1750s, and actually the pictures that I have on there are remnants of sawmills that are actually where the replica site of Fort King George is today. And this would become very big within yellow pine and cypress. The yellow pine was said to be very, very strong, and it would be shipped all over the world, South America, England, all over. And it was known that all of these trees would be shipped down the Altamaha River and out to where they needed to go. And then in 1819, you have the establishment of the Darien Bank. The Darien Bank is going to literally become the strongest banking institution in the South. But most people have never heard of it because it doesn't get talked about, and it has since closed. But these are just some of the things that make Darien unique in its own way, and where they have actually contributed to America itself. With that being said, eventually the timber industry is going to run out of steam. The railroad's going to come way too late, and unfortunately, it's not helpful when you've cut down all the trees and you don't have any more. So where else do you turn? Well, eventually, because Darien is right along the river, they're going to turn to the fishing industry. Every time you talk about a southern town, there's always a plantation somewhere in the mix. Darien's is the Butler Plantation. The Butler Plantation was owned by Pierce Butler. His brother was a co-owner, but Pierce is the one you hear more about. In the 1830s, he is going to meet an English actress named Frances Anne Kemble. They get married, they have 2 daughters, and eventually he does take her to this plantation in Darien. What's significant about that is that after they have divorced and she is back in England, she would publish an account of her time on this plantation. It's called Journal of a Residence on a Georgian Plantation. If you get a minute, check it out. Another thing about Butler Plantation, it would become significant with a time called the Weeping Time. Because Pierce is in horrible debt, basically from all of his gambling and money mismanagement, it's decided that in order to pay some of these debts, his slaves need to be sold. They're taken to Savannah for auction, and it would become known as the largest slave auction in U.S. history. Unfortunately, this would be a horrible time and rip many families apart. But after this, the plantation is going to change hands several times, and it would be a man named Huston, who was part owner of the New York Yankees, who would build the house that you see in the picture in 1927. Now, this picture, if you were to go there today, is not accurate. There was a fire, the house itself is burned, but the chimney from the original rice plantation is still there, and you can visit the grounds. Another significant part of Darien's history is in 1863, we would see the burning of the town. This would be done by Union soldiers from the 54th Massachusetts Battalion. They would loot and burn the city. Not many things are spared. But what's significant about this is Colonel Robert Gould Shaw refused to take part. He didn't want to do this. He would actually call it a satanic act. And he didn't want any part of it. It was only after he was threatened with a court-martial that he did anything at all. And even then, he tried to tell all of his troops, don't take it unless you think we need it. Don't burn anything. try very hard not to cause damage. Well, unfortunately, this is a very chaotic time, and these soldiers are doing whatever they want to do. And so, yes, the majority of the town is burned, which is why you'll see in my next slide, most of the waterfront will have nothing but tabby ruins from the buildings that once made it proud. So I have the pictures of the tabby ruins along the waterfront. The one in the middle I like to always throw out there because I think it is a prime example of nature reclaiming the land. This is an oak tree that is actually overtaking one of those tabby walls. It is a really pretty sight to see, just my opinion. The other picture will have the plaque that talks about the tabby ruins and what's left of them. However, the significance of this picture, you will see the building in the background. This is what was the Adam Strain building. And even though it would be burned in the 1863 fire, it's going to be refurbished in 1873, and eventually it's kind of left in disrepair. But some people would take care of that. They would restore the building, and it is now the Tabby House Brewing Company. And if you go to this place today, you can actually go upstairs and they have some artifacts that actually were from the businesses that were within the building itself. So it's a little makeshift museum inside. It's really cool. The industry is going to turn to, of course, fishing. And one of the things that I keep hearing, we love our Georgia shrimp. And I can't deny that I don't either. However, the railroad's going to come too late to Darien to help with especially the timber industry. And so eventually the bridge that you see in the picture, this was originally a railroad bridge. It was made of steel. And then when it comes to around 1920s, it's going to be converted into a pathway bridge for cars, and to this day has been redone and is now US 17. So there you go, people. Darien literally sits right along US 17. I get so excited talking about Darien simply because I have grown to love the place and I try to visit very often. Well, let me tell you what you would find in Darien if you were to visit today. So I'm going to start with, if you were to visit the Darien McIntosh Visitor Center, you are going to find a sculpture of Darien's legendary sea monster. Every town seems to have a little myth or legend that goes along with specifically their area. Well, Darien is no exception. Theirs being Alti, the sea monster. It's said that reports of eyewitness accounts go back to like the 1830s, but stories of this monster go all the way back to the local natives who would tell the stories to the European traders. If you visit discoverdarien.com, there is a little video on their website that actually tells the story of Alti. It's quite interesting. I myself have yet to find Alti, but I'm always looking out when I'm on the riverfront. I included the walking map tour because this will give you all of the places that have historical significance and really make Darien unique. You're going to have your squares, Columbus and Vernon squares. Darien's town was laid out like Savannah. Savannah has several squares, whereas Darien did as well. You're going to have your churches. You're going to have your old jail. You, of course, got the Tabby ruins on the waterfront and the Adam Strain building. But it's absolutely a beautiful walk if you were to do it. And it's fun along the way because you can stop at all these little businesses that have so many different things. I also would point out the waterfront itself. So that is the picture with the tree and the pavilion. They are very proud of their blessing of the fleet, which happens in April. I will have my first opportunity to go this year, and I can't wait because I hear it is an absolutely wonderful thing, and the community gets behind it in such a way that everyone just has a good time. I can't wait to see that. They're also doing a free waterfront concert series. And I believe it was the last series I saw the Darien Lions Club was asking for a canned food donation. And my personal opinion, since these are free concerts, if you attend any of those and they do that again, please consider donating. I think that's a very good cause. Just an opinion. Then you have the street picture. I point this out because the second Saturday of every month, this street is shut down and they held Second Saturday. Well, Second Saturday is local vendors selling local goods. This place and their sense of community and trying to support the local businesses and economy just is an amazing sight to see, because you don't see that in a lot of places. A lot of places are just trying to make things about tourism and about money, and it doesn't seem like that in Darien. It seems more of a community effort to help everyone. I want to thank the owners of the Marsh Pirate. They were kind enough to let me take their picture. However, I didn't want to point them out or single them out, but I will say thank you so much. They were kind enough to tell me their story as to why they chose Darien to open their business up, and it is the newest business to open on the Darien waterfront. If you get the chance, check it out too. But I have to give very much love to the waterfront winery. Russ, thank you so very much, because this was the first place that I went to when I needed to just kind of relax a little bit. And ever since my first visit, I have had nothing but kindness and really good wine. So let me say this. Everyone in there has been so kind, has basically become my friend, and I very much appreciate all of you. If you have a chance to visit Darien, please do, and support these local businesses and help to keep the history of this place alive. If you are unable to visit but you'd like to know more, I will give you some suggestions. Read anything by Buddy Sullivan. He absolutely can tell the story of Darien better than I can. I'm just an outside observer, but I thought this place was really cool and I wanted to try. So Buddy Sullivan has written books on Darien, absolutely worth the reads. And if you're on the fence about visiting and you're not quite sure, you think maybe, let me leave you with this. The day that me and my husband were going to leave to go to Darien, I'm scrolling through news stories online, and an article headline pops up, and it says, "The one town in Georgia everyone should visit once." Okay? World Atlas put out an article all about Darien, Georgia, suggesting that everyone should visit at least once. So, I will end my video by saying, happy 290th birthday, Darien. I hope you understand why I waited until January to put out the video regarding your town, but I hope that you know I do not wish to cause any negativity towards your town. I absolutely love it, and I would hope that this will encourage other people to learn about your history as well. And I cannot wait to see what you do for your 300th anniversary. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day.